Good morning, everyone. This is Mike Heath, Resource Specialist with the Coalition.
And I'm Julie Wallace, a Resource Specialist at the Coalition.
So here's a picture of us. So we have an action-packed agenda for all of you today with a lot of different topics that we want to explore, that we want to get feedback from. This is all about support and development of foster parents. As all of you know, we can't have retention without recruitment without retention, and we're going to replace retention with the support and development phrasing, because that's what it really is all about, making sure your foster parents are supported, making sure they're getting training, making sure that their needs are being met. So that's one of the first things we're going to talk about is inspiring, engaging foster parents. How can we make sure that the foster parents that have gone through all the necessary steps to become licensed at your agency are engaged with your agency, are engaged with the online staff, engaged with you as coordinators, and also inspired. So we will definitely talk about that throughout this training. And then another key component that we're going to discuss this morning is creating and implementing an exceptional customer service system. And some of this, as we're kind of talking about customer service, is going to look maybe a little bit different, because you're going to say, wait a minute, I signed up for a support and development webinar and you guys are kind of talking business strategies. But as I'm sure you're all aware, there's definitely a correlation between great customer service and what we do each and every day to support our foster families and make them feel a part of the team. So we're gonna dive into that topic as well. We're also going to look at some proven support and development strategies. And again, Julie and I are going to share research and information that we have, and we're really looking forward to hearing from all of you to hear your input on what's working and what can help your colleagues in the field. And I think it doesn't need to be stated, but I'm going to state it anyway. We all know that foster parents are our best recruiters. So we're going to talk about how we can utilize the resources, the expertise, the lived knowledge, the lived experience of our foster parents, and how they can help in the world of recruitment as well as support and development for one another, which is a key component as well. We're going to talk about foster parents' strengths and skills. And then last, and probably just as important as anything that we just discussed, we're going to talk about self-care for foster parents. And a key thing that I want to emphasize is we also feel that it's important, as all of us colleagues in the room, as in the social work environment and in this world, that we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and that we're taking care of one another as well. But our focus really will be on foster parents and how we can make sure that their bucket is full so that they can do everything that they need to do to support children.
So here's what the research tells us over and over. Foster parents begin with a love of children. Most of them leave not because they can't face the challenges of handling these youngsters, but because they fail to receive support from the system. So this makes support and development not just a recruitment issue, but think about foster parents who are having a difficult time and not feeling supported from the system. They're going out into the community and spreading that negative message. So this is why it's critical that we talk about support and development. And the system has a lot of parts to it. So let's think for a moment about the things that are within your control.
So on this slide, we have a couple questions. These are a couple of questions that we did forward out yesterday. And again, thank you for those that were able to send in your responses. And so we would really like at this time, if you have any feedback regarding these questions, if you could send those on to Lorianne, and then we can have a discussion. Again, the more we can learn from one another, the better that we can support our foster parents. So the first question that we're really looking at is, foster parents, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, they go through a lot of different steps and background checks and the training, and they get their license, and they probably put it in a frame and they put it on the wall, and then they wait. Oftentimes, not always, sometimes the phone rings pretty quickly. But for those families that get their license and that there aren't children that are ready to be welcomed into their home, how does your agency, how do you keep those foster parents connected to your agency and to one another? So if you guys can reflect on that and just type in your responses, we can discuss those and kind of go forward. The second question that Julie and I would love to hear your input and feedback on is, why is it important to keep foster parents connected to one another? And more importantly, how? How do you, as foster care coordinators, as licensing workers, keep your foster parents connected to one another? So I'll just pause for a little bit and we'll wait to see if there's any responses. As we're waiting, a key thing again is, as you heard us talking, Julie and I talking at the very beginning, that we want to keep that support and development for your families when they go through that process, and keeping them connected to your agency. That's kind of why we wanted to kick off the training with that question, because oftentimes if foster parents don't feel they're part of the team, then that can be an issue that we need to kind of discuss and strategize about how we can keep them connected. So any thoughts from?
So one agency indicates that they connect families to a mentor after they get their first placement, so that they have somebody besides the social worker to ask questions of.
Wonderful.
Got some more here. An agency keeps a mailing list that they send out training information to foster parents on almost on a daily basis, so that they can keep them informed. Another agency has foster parent events, such as a back to school event, foster parent appreciation event. They try to do 2 to 3 events a year and invite all of their foster homes. They also do a newsletter twice a year to keep them updated. One county has joined with other counties to write for a grant to support foster parents. Part of what they plan to do is to create a website that foster parents can chat with each other on regarding concerns, needs, ideas, etc. They'll be able to share information about connecting, mentoring programs, a newsletter, recognition, keeping informed of community events and trainings, reaching out personally. A closed Facebook page is another idea.
Fantastic.
Movie, as you all know, the coalition recently hosted the Instant Family movie screening here in the southeastern part of Wisconsin. So that's something that more folks are kind of jumping on the bandwagon and doing. Sending gift cards for exceptional work. Inviting foster parents to participate in training so that they're connecting and gathering together.
And I'll share a response that we had received from the questions that we received yesterday from one of the coordinators. Is they're creating a foster parent supply pantry in kind of a collaborative work with other agencies. So I think that's fabulous as well. Let's see. Another idea for everyone is, because all these ideas are just wonderful. I've been kind of taking notes as Julie's been sharing them with us. Is you can connect your foster parents to the coalition. We have an email distribution list, as I'm sure many of you are aware. That's for you as case managers and coordinators, as well as for your families, to stay in contact with upcoming trainings that we are aware of, and different events that are going on. So that's just another great way to keep them connected as well.
And one individual indicated that it's been more difficult to keep foster parents connected because they're preferring to watch webinars rather than come to an in-person training. However, the coalition encourages you to gather your foster parents for webinar viewings. You can gather as many people as you'd like in a room, and we have a flat fee for that webinar charge. So that's a great way to gather people together. And you could add something else in there, like perhaps providing a meal, maybe adding in childcare. So the webinar, even though it seems like a kind of an impersonal technique for delivering a training, it can actually be a way to connect your parents.
And Julie, I'm glad that you shared that about, a lot of families, it sounds like, and we've been hearing that throughout the state. So I don't think that's just in that one county or that agency. A lot of foster parents, let's face it, in today's technology, today's world, a lot of folks are doing things via the internet, or that's how they're collaborating, that's how they're connecting with one another. A lot of our foster parents, as you all know, that have been licensed for a number of years, they're going to be retiring. We all know this. And so we're going to have a younger generation of foster parents that are going to be getting licensed, and we're going to have to adapt and change and kind of meet them where they're at. So I agree with Julie that that's definitely a great way to keep them connected and have that discussion, to invite them to come out for a meeting. And we all know if you have pizza or ice cream or something to entice them, that's also helpful.
Another agency is doing monthly fundraising activities to fundraise for foster care related items, and that's another way for foster parents to get out and get connected.
This is where we kind of dive into the whole kind of concept about positive experience versus negative experiences, kind of that business philosophy model. So as we all know, when something really great happens to you, we all appreciate that when we have good customer service. But we don't always tell people about the great things, do we? Typically, when there's something negative, that's a lot of times when there's going to be some conversation. So we want to keep our families connected to positivity. And again, Julie and I and Lorianne, we all understand that foster parent development and support, foster parent recruitment is not just one person's job and responsibility, even though sometimes it may feel that way. For those of you that is your job in addition to 4 or 5 other different jobs, or even if that is your job for multiple families, that's a lot to do. So we really emphasize that this is an entire agency approach to making sure that foster families have that positive experience from the initial contact with your agency throughout the process. And so I think that's really important to keep that in mind. So we want to encourage the positive as much as we can. So here's the statistics. Here's some raw data. So as I kind of alluded to at the beginning of this conversation about customer service matters, is typically if something negative happens for poor customer service, kind of take the customer service and reframe that to negative interactions with the agency or with the folks. They're gonna tell about 15 people on average, and that's just an average. So that could be 30 or more folks that they're telling. And those of you that are from small communities, rural communities, the word gets out very quickly, as we know, and so that's why it's even more vital to try and make sure that the message that they're going to convey is the second part of this, that if something positive happens, that they're going to have that, they're going to tell about 11 people on average about that positive experience. So obviously that's the bucket that we want our families to feel engaged, feel empowered, feel that their voices are heard, feel that they feel welcomed by, again, everybody at your agency. So I think that's really important. This next bullet point, after one negative experience, this kind of blew me away when I first saw this, when Julie and I were putting this presentation together. 51%, over half of customers will never do business with that company again from one negative experience. So think about that. We're asking our foster parents to take on a lot of different responsibilities, and if there is a negative experience, we have that unfortunate probability, and I don't usually talk in statistical language, but the probability that they may decide that this isn't going to be a good thing for them if they don't feel like they belong or if they had a negative experience. So really want to, and again, that doesn't fall on any one person's shoulders. That is the responsibility of the entire agency to provide that positive customer service. And then, as you can see, feeling under or unappreciated is the number one reason why customers switch away from products or services. And we hear that continually here at the coalition, that if families do not feel a connection, if they don't feel that they are appreciated, that is when families decide that they're going to no longer be foster parents. And then your job as a recruiter becomes even more difficult. So again, I think it's just important that we just really talk about things from that kind of business customer service perspective, because we want families to, when they come into your agency, to stay and to be a part of that, to feel part of the team, to feel appreciated. So hearing all those great things about different events and dinners and different ways of appreciation, those are fabulous, because sometimes it's the smallest things that make the biggest difference. And so anytime you can have that positive impact where foster families, resource families feel like they're appreciated, that's going to go a long way towards keeping them as a part of your foster parent team.
Okay, so let's talk about customer service. Initially here, let's talk about customer service model with your prospective foster parents. So when you're out doing those recruitment events, as Mike indicated, at very first contact, you need to be thinking about your customer service. So what are some things to think about when you're first interacting with your potential foster parents? If you're at an event, did you engage with them immediately, or did you sit behind your table and wait for them to come up and sort of look at your pens and your magnets and your stickers and whatever else you're giving away, and kind of wait for them to interact with you? Are you being engaging? Are you asking questions? Are you being an inviting host at your table? And what do you have at your table? Think about what is drawing families in. Do you have kid-friendly items at your table? Are you, so, you know, all the things that we've talked about before with recruitment. How first contact comes across to folks as they approach you at an event is critical. And when you began having this conversation with your prospective foster parents, you know, are you listening as well as telling them about fostering? Are you hearing where they're coming from and understanding what some of their concerns might be about thinking about fostering? If they're calling your agency with their initial inquiry, if it's not at an event and you're not the first person taking the phone call, what does that look like? Is the person answering the phones for your agency, are they positive? Are they supportive? Are they getting that inquiry where it needs to go right off the bat, so that people are getting great customer service the moment that they call your agency? And then we look at follow-up. When you're going out and doing recruiting events, it's great to consider all of the aspects of recruitment and having your foster parent champions there and all of those great things. But then if you don't have a plan for follow-up right after the event, that's not good customer service. I mean, think about what's going to happen the day after an event. Let's say you get 5 people calling. Do you have a plan in place, or are you kind of fumbling around and thinking, okay, now what do we do? You know, what is our plan? So have the plan ready to go before you go out for that event, so that you can provide the best customer service for folks the moment they call. And when they do call, do you have something available to them? Do you have a packet ready to send? Are you going to be scheduling an information session in a very short period of time so that you're staying connected to these prospective foster parents? You really want to have that piece of the plan in place. If they have to wait a long time before they get more contact, or they get their information, or they're able to speak to someone, you may lose them in that process. And then your information sessions themselves, how do yours look? Think about ways that you could possibly improve your information sessions. Are you offering childcare? Do you have things to eat? Do you have your foster parent rock stars there to provide that lived experience when you're engaging with people at information sessions? And then, as Mike was indicating earlier, once people are licensed, if they're having to wait, you know, what does that look like? Are they just hanging out there wondering? Lots of people get kind of insecure when they're sitting out there. They're not getting those calls. They're not getting a placement. They're starting to wonder, you know, am I really cut out for this? Is there something about me? Why am I not getting a placement? People just start to get insecure and may actually drop off. So it's really important to stay connected to your foster parents once they're licensed, and throughout the licensing process. Think about how long it takes to do a home study, to go through the training, to get the background checks done. It's a several month process. How can you keep folks engaged with your agency throughout every step of that process?
Thank you, Julie. So now we want to really, kind of dive deep into the support and development strategies. And as you'll see on this slide, what are the effective support and development strategies? You all have identified those in your input and feedback that you've shared with us already. And we've talked about it. We've talked about the importance of communication, having that open communication, sharing as much information as you have with the foster parents that are first coming on. And this is also for your seasoned foster parents, because again, we want to make sure that the same level of customer service that Julie and I have been discussing is provided for all families at all stages of their fostering experience. So keeping that communication loop open, I think is really important. Respite, I don't think we can talk about respite care enough. Respite support, taking a break, making sure that families have that opportunity to have respite support if they need it. So I think that's important. And then, as we kind of discussed earlier, perhaps your agency is it a possibility that when foster parents are initially licensed and they're waiting for that phone to ring, as we've talked about, can they be respite care providers, kind of put their toe in the water to kind of feel what it's going to be like to be a foster parent? And so that's just something to consider. And then I know that we talk about team, that treating foster parents as members of but we want to include, that's why child is capitalized, child's support team. Again, if they don't feel connected, they're connected to the child. That's why they're doing what they're doing. They want to empower, they want to enrich, they want to make a difference. Julie and I and the rest of the team here at the Coalition, we field calls on a daily basis from prospective foster parents that are excited, enthusiastic. They want to make that difference, but they're also anxious. They're also not sure. They're also, how do I do this? And so we kind of help them along that process. The same thing that you all do on a daily basis, but we want to emphasize that team approach for the child and the foster parents and all of you and the caseworkers working in tandem together. Respect is a key thing. As we all know, that's important that we're being respectful. We heard from a foster parent, because again, Julie and I and Lorianne and the rest of our team here at the Coalition, we have the opportunity and the unique privilege of hearing from foster parents throughout the state. And we wanted to share this quote that was shared to us recently that I think really encapsulates what we've been discussing so far. So this is what a licensed foster parent shared with Julie and I not too long ago. My own experience when I first started, I had caseworkers that kept me completely in the dark. They also didn't suggest I go to hearings. It could have been very easy to walk away from fostering after our first child was reunified, as I felt I was taken advantage of. And the piece of advice that and she's still licensed, she's still a foster parent, she's still one of our rock star foster parent champions out there in Wisconsin, thankfully, because as you can see, this is pretty intense statements and feelings and emotions that she shared with us. The last thing she left is she said, please, please, please never use the phrase, and this is for everybody at your agency, so please share this. Anything that Julie and I and Lorianne are sharing today, please make sure that other folks in your agency hear this. Never say the phrase, this is what you signed up for. Because imagine how that must feel or would feel to a foster parent that, wait a minute, I didn't actually know what I was signing up for. And support services, resources. So Julie and I have been discussing the importance of keeping families connected. And it's so empowering to hear from several of you, many of you, that you are keeping your parents connected through support programs. There's several agencies now that are really taking the concept of mentoring and taking it to a whole nother level, where a foster parent champion, a foster parent rock star, is being there for other foster parents. Ingenious. What a great way to keep foster parents connected and making sure that they're taking care of themselves. Are there any other thoughts or suggestions of things that we didn't talk about that you think would be important?
Mike, I'm going to just go back one
Oh,
slide
please.
and talk about and ask for your input on this whole idea of treating your foster parents well. There's this phrase that we all hear in recruitment: what are you doing to treat your foster parents like gold? And this would be a time when we'd like to pause and have you provide some input on how your agency as a whole is treating your foster parents like gold. So outside of your child welfare unit, your recruitment team, and you yourself as a coordinator, what is your agency doing to treat your foster parents like gold? So we're just going to take a minute here to ask for you to provide input in the Q&A box. So we've got a couple of responses here we'd like to share. One is that they feel that their agency supports all of their efforts to be supportive of their foster parents and encourages any ideas that they have to assist their foster parents. So that's great to hear that someone has an agency that is aware of what they're doing and is supportive of their activities. Here's one that's really more related maybe to the child welfare unit, but they indicate that they complete the CANS assessment with the foster parents because they feel they're the expert on the children and what the children's needs are. So that's great to hear. I know often foster parents complain that they feel a little out of the loop when it comes to assessing with the CANS. And of course that affects rates and level of care. So it's great to hear that this agency is making sure that they're part of that process. Here's another person. As a coordinator, I make sure there's an open door or phone policy for all the foster parents. So they make sure that they're available.
Wonderful.
Here's the same agency has a Facebook page for foster parents, and it's totally administered by a foster parent. So they were able to get the word out on things like their showing of Instant Family, the movie. They connect for dinner plans.
And again, what a great way to connect with families in this digital social media age, of meeting them where they're at, like we've discussed, and sharing that information with them so they can get access to those resources. That's fantastic.
We're kind of jumping ahead with some of the responses here to what the child welfare unit is doing. So if folks want to respond to that one as well, whether it's your child welfare unit or your recruitment team, go ahead and type in the things that you're doing to treat your foster parents like gold. Here's a unit that acknowledges their foster parents in a newsletter. They acknowledge the specific parents who they feel are doing great things, and they try to highlight different families with each newsletter.
Beautiful.
This agency checks in with phone calls. They check in when they go on vacation. When foster parents have a big life event, they make sure to check in and see how they're doing. They either say congratulations and celebrate with them, or to show their concern if things aren't going well. This agency gives their foster parents Christmas presents every year. This agency is meeting with the different units in their agency to update them on their foster care recruitment and on their foster care program. They encourage teamwork in their agency. Nominating foster parents for governor's awards, that's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Checking in right after placements occur, I think that is a really excellent one. I mean, if you can check in within 24 hours after a placement, that really helps foster parents feel supported, gets their questions answered. If they've got needs for items, that can come through at that point.
And I think to kind of follow up with that as well is, just asking those questions, open-ended questions for your foster families of, how are you doing? Are you okay? Especially after like a child is reunited with their family. That's a lot of emotional investment by the foster family. And so there is that grief, there is that loss, and sometimes, you know, foster parents, as I'm sure a lot of you have heard, oh, I'm doing fine, I'm doing okay. No, really, how is it going? What can I do to help? And maybe what you're doing to help is just to be there to listen and to make sure that they're heard and make sure that they know that you're a resource for them and for them. So, and that again goes for all the folks in your agency. So,
Yeah, I was just going to say, as your foster parents are interacting with other units in your agency, for example, economic support or childcare or the fiscal department, we're hoping that you're having those conversations with staff so that they're very supportive when foster parents contact them with questions or concerns or needs. Some of the other ideas that we've heard across the state are handwriting thank you notes to foster parents, having all of the child welfare staff sign those handwritten notes, organizing a list of your staff and their contact information and what their specialties are. So if foster parents have a need, they'll know immediately who to call and how to get the assistance they need. Provide
more interesting point. This one agency is saying that they send birthday cards to the youth in the home as well. So we don't want to forget about that.
very good.
One agency, when they have new foster parents who are newly licensed, they send them a card thanking them for caring for children made by children. They have the kids making cards.
Oh, and you guys already answered this. Again, we you know, kind of the question at the bottom of the foster parent champions, rock stars. How can we express their appreciation? The handwritten notes, the cards, the dinners, bringing supplies to the home, checking in with families. Those little things are big things, and you're doing them, and thank you for that. And we also heard that agencies are partnering, collaborating with other agencies. What a beautiful thing that is to you know, to support one another, to support collectively your families. So continue that great work. And if you're not one of those counties that isn't collaborating, perhaps that's a great discussion item to have with your county partners or your agency partners, how you can all work together, because we're all doing the same thing of trying to support children and support our families and develop them the best that we can. I think, and again, you guys are ahead of the curve here. But I think this is important that we talk about foster parent champions. As most of you know, I was with the coalition for 10 years, and then I came back, and it was always one of those things that I thought, wouldn't it be great if there were foster parent champions that could support other foster parents? And then I come back to the coalition and I hear about this great program and this great training that we have foster parent champions. Julie and I and Lorianne and the rest of our team here at the coalition are just thrilled because we know that foster parents are our best recruiters, and we know that foster parents, they have that lived experience, they have that shared experience, they speak the same language akin to us as social workers, oftentimes have the same language and using acronyms and don't even realize it sometimes. So I think that's important, that how can you get your foster parent champions more involved? Julie talked about when you're having an event like at a fair or a recruitment thing, having foster parent champions be a part of that. Again, I've done like live radio interviews and TV things, and I'm like, I can talk, but I would rather have you talk to the experts, and we know our experts are our foster parents, and that's who we really need to connect prospective families with our licensed foster parents, so they can have that discussion and talk about the realities of foster care, but also the beauties of foster care and the joys and the gifts that fostering can present, as well as the balancing of, it can be difficult at times, but we have this great support network of other foster parents. We have this great support team of social workers that are there for us at all hours of the night. That's critical. So foster parent champions, you know, they can check in with your foster parents throughout the licensing process, as we kind of talked about. Wouldn't that be great? Because that way they can kind of talk about, I've been there, been through that. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Are there questions? How can I support you? I think that's what's all wonderful things, and mentoring. So they get their foster parent license, as we talked about previously earlier in this presentation. And we're hearing from agencies across this state that mentoring programs are being created by your agencies, which is just fabulous again. So mentoring, foster parent champions can be that mentor, that support, that encouragement. You remember that quote from that foster parent that was ready to just, after one child was welcomed into their home, say, that's it, I'm done. But if they had another foster parent to connect with.
Okay, so we'd just like you to take a moment to reflect on the challenges that foster parents face in their work. You don't need to type it into the Q&A box. We'd just like you to take a moment to jot down a couple of things that you know foster parents face that are maybe negative when they first start fostering, or maybe in the middle of their fostering experience. Just take a moment to list a couple of challenges. So we're going to present just sort of a smattering of challenges that we've heard people talk about, that we know some foster parents have faced, and we'll just kind of run through these quickly. Allegations, that's a major negative challenge that many foster parents ultimately do face.
And someone just asked, right before you said that, someone just typed in a child making false allegations against a foster parent.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Difficult interactions with birth parents, we know that's very common. Lack of privacy. I mean, think about the fact that your caseworkers are coming into their homes, the birth parents are coming into their homes. That's a challenge. Grief and loss. Myths of foster care. They're going out into the community and people are saying, oh yeah, you're just, they hear that. Even in court, sometimes they'll hear, oh yeah, they're just doing it for the money. Or there'll be sensational news stories that they have to deal with. There's all that negative stigma around foster care. The challenging behaviors of the kids themselves. Public scrutiny. They always feel like they're kind of on, they have to be on and everything has to go as well as possible when they're in public. Lots of demands on their times, meetings with social workers, school meetings, school issues, therapy appointments, doctor appointments. We know that foster parents are doing a lot of running and are extremely busy folks. They might have their own set of biological kids that they're doing all those things with as well. They might have to miss work due to a court hearing or due to some challenging issue happening with one of the kids that's placed in their home. It's a stressor on their marriage. We know that. We've heard from birth children of foster parents that having kids in care in their homes is difficult for them. Unpredictability of their lifestyle. It's very hard for people to plan vacations or even just weekends away. Maybe they want to go to a wedding and suddenly everything becomes very complex. So that's a challenge. Foster parents feel they're held to a higher standard than your average parent, which we know that they are. Sadness, overwhelming feelings, and then when we get bizarre behavior like feces smearing, kids with really severe trauma might have some really challenging behaviors. Threats by the children in care to the foster parents' own kids, and then powerless to make decisions. So again, that whole teamwork thing. If foster parents aren't feeling that they're part of the team, they may have very strong feelings about the permanency plan goals for this child, and they might feel that they're not part of the decision-making process.
We have a couple of people who contributed some challenges as well. Understanding the system and that the judge can make decisions that even the social workers may not agree with, but have to abide by.
Good one.
Yeah.
Another one, insurance claims for damage to homes, where the foster parents' insurance rates go up because they have to file that claim to get it rejected.
And another health issues that foster parents have. Often they have a challenging time meeting their own, health care needs. So when we think about ways that they need support, all of those areas are things that we can think about in terms of how to be supportive to our foster parents. Grief and loss might be something that we don't normally think about, but secondary trauma is a huge part of what foster parents experience every day. They are taking on the trauma of the kids that are coming into their homes. And not only that, but when they develop a relationship with kids and then they are reunified or they move on to a permanent placement, they have that grief to cope with. And so we want to be providing support and talking about, what are your feelings about having had this child in your home? What was the relationship like, and how will you now deal with that loss? Again, input on decision making, so critical. We often are so short of time as social workers, and we need to get decisions done. We need to get those court reports out. We need to get the permanency plan goals on record. We're working in Missaquis, and we forget that foster parents just really appreciate a phone call to find out what is their input on a permanency plan goal. Do they think the child is ready to return home? That input is just so critical in making them feel like they're part of the team. We hear from many foster parents who say they didn't get parts A and B when kids were placed in their homes, even though it should be provided. They're having kids placed with very little information and feeling very left out there alone to deal with issues that they may not even be aware of. So getting them those documents and making sure that you're filling them in on all the critical information is so important. And then helping them feel adequately prepared. If they've got kids with special needs, if they've got challenging behaviors, if there's mental illness that they're coping with, how are we giving our foster parents the tools that they need to meet those needs? And then, as Mike was saying earlier, compassion fatigue and burnout, such a huge issue with foster parents. When you think of all of the challenges that we just talked about, how can we make sure that they are taking care of themselves?
We had someone point out as well in the comments field that we need to think about that in terms of relative caregivers as well, that they meet some special challenges above and beyond even what some of our foster parents
That's a great
are
point.
dealing with.
So when we think about development, this is kind of the flip side of support. Think about our foster parents as professionals, as people who've gotten education around caring for kids and who yearn and seek more education and training to do their job as best they can do it. So when we think about development, we want to expand on their strengths. We want to think about it as professional growth. So is your agency able to provide updated resources? Do you have access to the newest research and best training for foster parents? Do you have services in your community or nearby so that the children in care can access the therapy that they need, the providers that they need, the educational options that might be available? How can your agency support that? And we've always talked about data. If you were part of the recruitment series last year, and if you weren't, you still know that data is an important thing to collect in your recruitment efforts. When you collect data on your foster parents, it's going to help inform your plan to develop them. What kinds of folks have you recruited? What are their skills? What are their aptitudes? And how can your agency expand on those and support those? Individualized training plans, some of you do those. Lots of folks do not have that, but it's great to sit down with a foster family and find out what are their interests, where do they feel like they've got some gaps in their training, where do they want to expand, and come up with an individualized training plan. There's lots of resources for training in the coalition, outside the coalition. There are national websites that can be utilized. We have a learning library here that you can check materials out of. So any way that you can individualize a development plan for a foster family is going to go a long way. And then a debrief with families after kids leave. Find out, like Mike said, what do they need? What happened? What went well? What didn't go so well? That's an important piece. Stay interviews, exit interviews, all of those items are helpful in development. I just wanted to bring up an example of, we all know that recruiting new foster homes for teens can be challenging. You're not only asking folks to learn about fostering, but now you're throwing them into kind of the deep end of the pool in terms of this developmental phase that is challenging even for parents of biological kids. So rather than recruiting specifically for teens, you might consider a development strategy where you take an existing home of folks who've been fostering for a long time, have a lot of experience, and maybe are ready to kind of move on up and do something different. So have that conversation with them. Find out if it's something they might be interested in, and then identify their strengths and weaknesses. Look at where you're going to need to support them and fill in the gaps, get some additional training. educate them about the needs of teens, what that developmental phase looks like, and then with trauma added to that, layered on, what might be some of the things they're going to be having to cope with. Dispel misconceptions and stereotypes. We all hear people talk about young people in negative ways, so you can really help dispel some of those myths about teens when you're having that conversation. And then what can your agency do to increase their capacity to care for teens? Do you have staff that can provide intensive support? Do you have trainings that you can offer? Again, come to the coalition, look at our learning library, check out the webinars that we have available. And then with teens, maybe respite is going to be an important aspect of that kind of fostering. So again, development is one way for you to meet the needs of your agency and the kids coming into care by just enhancing the strengths of your existing parents. Okay, so we're going to just talk a little bit now about self-care strategies. We really want to promote this with our foster parents, again, to prevent compassion fatigue or burnout. So one thing that can be difficult with lots of kids coming into care is allowing foster parents to take time between placements. But if that's something that they're expressing a need for, if they have some self-awareness enough to know that they kind of need to regroup between placements, we really encourage you to do everything you can to respect that and to not, cave to the temptation to call them when they are on that hiatus. And we've talked about respite over and over. Can't emphasize that enough. Lots of foster parents really hesitate to use respite. They just feel like it's a negative reflection on their need for a break. So really encourage them to see it in a positive light, and then do everything you can to support the respite experience itself, the transportation, making sure that the kids are okay, making sure that when they come back that they're being helped to be regulated, that sort of thing. Prudent parenting is, a newer thing that may help your foster parents get a little more time off, carpooling to extracurricular activities. Sleepovers are now possible, kids doing things with friends. All those things were so restricted a few years ago, but now you can encourage your foster parents to, have their kids be engaging in social activities where the foster parents are getting a break. And then again, the connection piece, we can't really overstate that enough, whether it's a foster or whether it's a Facebook group or whether it's in-person connection, that connection with other people who are experiencing the same things that they are is critical. And we've talked about stay interviews, and the coalition has the questions that we can suggest. If you haven't done stay interviews, we really highly recommend them. We've got examples of those that we can send you if you're interested in that. So just some ideas for self-care. Also, Mike and I also want to reiterate that if you're thinking about providing or starting a foster parent support group, we can provide some technical assistance around that.
So yeah, some more top ideas about self-care. Just making sure I know a lot of us have heard about mindfulness. Now there's magazines about mindfulness and books. Again, in our library here at the coalition, we have some great resources. It's just being in the present moment is the best way I can kind of encapsulate what that means. And I think that really ties in importantly with self-care. And reaching out, we talk about foster parent champions. Reaching out to the community champions in your community, the partner agencies, the Ys, the fitness centers, rec centers. Are they willing to help out with discounts? Are they willing to be there as a resource for our resource families? So sometimes it's just to ask. It's reaching out to some of those agencies. And I know many of you have done that and have created some great partnerships. So for those of you that haven't, we would really encourage you to explore that further to see how you can make sure that you have community partners. And you never know if that might lead to an interest in a prospective foster family that maybe belongs to the Y or another agency that you're going to partner with. Julie talked about our library, and we have a great collection of foster care and adoption resources. We make it as easy as possible for folks. If they don't have an internet connection, they can call us and we can find information. We can send that out, or they can just go online, as a lot of folks do, and find the resources by subject, author, or title, and find the resources that they need, and we will send them to them and include postage page, self-addressed as stamped envelope to have it sent back to us. I know a lot of you are doing mom's nights out, dad's nights out, date nights. So those are all great ways, again, to make sure that our families are being taken care of and feeling refreshed, and making sure that self-care is at the forefront, not the back of what's happening. So I think we'll just kind of carry on with the, if you have any additional ideas, just feel free to let Lori Ann know, and we'll be happy to talk about that.
And then you want to be thinking about the foster parent's lifestyle. I mean, it might sound a little bit personal and intrusive, but we all know foster parents are the kinds of folks who really give and give and give. And if they're not refilling their cup, they're going to be experiencing that compassion fatigue. So have conversations with them about their individual lifestyle. As Mike was mentioning, mindfulness is really big right now. Meditation, prayer, yoga, those are all really at the forefront of self-care right now. Awareness. Have those conversations about what the challenges are that your foster parents are experiencing. Often they are hesitant to bring to your agency or to their caseworker or to you as a coordinator the challenges that they're facing and how much they are stressing them out. So by you having those conversations, you're going to be aware and they're going to be aware. If you're not aware of what's happening, you can't really fix it. Walking, sleep, and rest. I mean, all these typical things that we talk about but are so bad at actually carrying out. Just can't reiterate enough that self-care is important. And then I just want to focus for a moment on the last one. Create personal relationships that are nurturing. I know in my experience as a worker, my foster parents that I worked with, I noticed were often feeling very isolated. They could not share their experiences with their neighbors or their friends or their relatives. I mean, everything's confidential. And beyond that, people who don't foster can't really relate to what foster parents are experiencing. So that idea of having a personal connection with other people who get it, who have that experience, or who are nurturing people, that's really critical for foster parents. So if you're finding that they're feeling isolated or not getting out, not having any kind of social life, that's really something that you need to have a conversation about. And as an agency, do what you can to support that effort.
And
So we just want to recap today's webinar. These were the main points that we tried to emphasize. Relationships, building relationships with your foster parents. This is the primary way that you're going to help them feel supported and connected to each other. Using that customer service model. Again, we don't think of ourselves as corporations or businesses, but we can really use a customer service approach when we think about how best we can support these folks. What are you doing with your foster parent champions? Do you have them? Have they been trained? Have you included them in as many activities of support for your foster families as possible? Those folks are out there and they're passionate, and they're enthusiastic, and they want to be doing whatever they can to support foster care, so utilize them. And then giving them the tools, what are the resources that they need? What is your agency doing to support them in their work? How can the coalition help? And then thinking about foster parents as professionals, thinking about developing them beyond just supporting. How can you help them cultivate those skills and strengths so that they can fill in the activities that your agency needs. And then last but not least, the self-care strategies. So these are the main points we covered today, and we wonder if you have any questions or comments at this time.